Let me know the countdown, please.
You're good to go.
Good afternoon. My name is Alaa Kamil, and I will serve as the designated federal official for the Science Advisory Committee on Chemicals, SAC, peer review of the draft risk evaluations for dibutyl phthalate, dicyclohexyl phthalate, and di-2-ethylhexyl phthalate, and also the technical support documents for butylbenzyl phthalate and diisobutyl phthalate. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's virtual preparatory meeting. As the designated federal official for this meeting, I serve as a liaison between the peer reviewers and the agency. Also, in my role as designated federal official, a critical responsibility is to work with appropriate agency officials to ensure that all appropriate ethics regulations are satisfied. In this capacity, reviewers are briefed on the provisions of the federal conflict of interest laws, and each peer reviewer has filed a government confidential financial disclosure report, which has been reviewed to ensure all ethics requirements are met. This preparatory meeting is focused on the scope and clarity of the draft charge questions. We will not be discussing the draft risk evaluation documents under review. So we would like to thank the public for attending and for providing public comments. We actually have 2 public commenters who registered to make brief oral comments related to the clarity and scope of the draft charge questions. The agency appreciates peer reviewers' time and diligent work in preparing for this meeting and the public for attending and sending comments. Please be advised that the agenda times are approximate. When the discussion for one topic is completed, the discussions for the next topic will begin. I also wish to thank my EPA colleagues and all branches and divisions who participated in the preparation of this peer review. And we have a slide for an acknowledgement for the EPA participant who participated in this meeting. And those on the left side are those who participated from the Office of Program Support, Peer Review and Ethics branch, and we have also other branches from and divisions that also participated in this meeting. Thank you very much. So for this meeting, we have asked Dr. Robin-Ann Gentry, an appointed committee member, to co-lead portions of the committee discussions. Dr. Gentry has graciously agreed to serve in this capacity, assisting Dr. Cobb in facilitating the meeting as the Office of Chemical Support, Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention walks through the process of updating its charters and exploring the appointment of co-chairs for its federal advisory committees. I would also like to thank Dr. George Cobb for serving as chair of the committee and all the members of the committee, as well as the ad hoc reviewers. We also want to thank the public for attending this important meeting. We appreciate the time and effort of the committee members in preparing for this meeting, considering their busy schedules. Regarding the meeting operations, we will ensure adequate time for the agency presentations, public commenters, and peer reviewers to discuss their questions with the agency presenters and public commenters. The meeting is being recorded and webcasted over the internet via YouTube and by teleconference for audio. There is a public docket for this meeting, and it is in regulations.gov, and the docket ID is EPA-HQ-OPPT-2024-0551. Copies of all meeting materials and public comments will be available in this docket. We posted a draft agenda for this meeting and a draft agenda for the SAC meeting that is coming up on August 4 to 8, 2025. And these are posted at regulations.gov under the same docket number. Please keep in mind that this meeting is only for points of clarification regarding the charge, not for reviewer or public discussion of technical information or the peer review documents. Again, I wish to thank the reviewers for your participation in today's meeting, and I will turn it over now to our esteemed chair, Dr. George Cobb, to introduce the committee members and ad hoc reviewers. Dr. Cobb?
Thank you, Ella, and thanks everyone.
You went on mute, Dr. Cobb.
It was supposed to be unmuted. I don't know what happened. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. Ella, thank you for that introduction. I'd like to echo the thanks to the peer review and ethics branch and their contractors, as well as to the career scientists at the EPA who have prepared these extensive documents that we're going to review over the next couple of weeks. I'd like to specifically welcome Dr. Gentry as a co-chair. This is a good opportunity for some sharing of responsibilities for this really large docket that we have. So without further ado, I'm George Cobb. I am the chair of the Environmental Science Department at Baylor University, and I'm a chemist by training and do primarily exposure assessment and bioaccumulation and those types of things. So now to go to the rest of the committee, Dr. Chason. Chris here.
Hello, I'm Dr. Chris Chason, retired recently from the Lifeline Group. My background academically was cellular biochemistry, and over my career, I've done risk assessment and specialized in modeling for exposure assessment. Thank you.
Dr. Ike.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephanie Ike, and I'm an assistant professor at Emory University with a primary appointment in environmental health and a secondary appointment in epidemiology. I'm an environmental epidemiologist, and most of my work focuses on health effects of chemical mixtures.
Thank you. Dr. Fong.
Hi, good afternoon. My name's Art Fong, and I am the technical leader for Smarter Chemistry at Apple. Smarter Chemistry is where we're pioneering the use of green and sustainable chemistry innovation to make sure that our products are safe for our workers, our customers, our recyclers, and to be better for the environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Fox.
Hello, I'm Mary Fox. I'm an associate practice professor in health policy and management at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health with a joint appointment in environmental health and engineering. I have training in environmental health policy and how we use risk assessment to set those policies. And chemical mixtures and cumulative risk is one of my areas of interest.
Thank you. And our new co-chair, Dr. Gentry.
Thank you, Dr. Cobb. I'm Robin Ann Gentry. I'm a board certified and PhD toxicologist and a principal with Ramble. And I have over 35 years of experience in conducting human health risk assessments for various chemicals.
Thank you. Dr. Graham.
Hello, everyone. I am Cynthia Graham. I am an independent toxicology consultant for industry. I've been working in industry for over 25 years. My main area of interest is dermal and respiratory sensitization and exposure assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see Dr. Heiger Bernays there, so we can go to Ms. Jenkins.
Good afternoon. I'm Allison Jenkins. I'm a regulatory toxicologist at the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. I've been here at the TCQ for over 25 years. But before that, I worked as a toxicologist for a couple of different consulting firms and the U.S. Air Force. I do a little bit of everything here at the TCQ with water, air, and waste issues across Texas. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see Dr. Lee either. Dr. Lee there? Dr. Nieves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Francesca Merced Nieves. I'm an assistant professor at Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai with joint appointments in the Department of Public Health and Environmental Medicine. I have training in both neurotoxicology and environmental epidemiology, and I specifically focus on prenatal exposures individually and as mixtures on brain development.
Thank you. Dr. Ottinger.
Good afternoon. I'm Marianne Ottinger. I'm an emeritus professor and continue as a research professor at the University of Houston. I'm trained as an endocrinologist, a neuroendocrinologist, and I've done a lot of work on comparative effects of toxins and endocrine disruptors on wildlife and on laboratory species. Thank you.
Dr. Sammel. She said she might have a conflict for a few minutes. Mr. Wright?
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Wright. I'm the former director of Health, Safety, and Environment for the United Steelworkers Union, now retired, which, despite its short name, represents the majority of organized chemical workers and workers in the chemical-related industries like paper, rubber, the oil industry, etc. My training was in industrial engineering, public health, and environmental health sciences.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Babbage.
Hello, I'm Michael Babbage. I'm recently retired from the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, where I was the director of the Division of Toxicology and Risk Assessment. I was involved in many risk assessments and exposure assessments. In particular, I worked with our chronic hazard advisory panel, who conducted a cumulative risk assessment of phthalates.
Excellent. Thank you. Dr. Ching? Dr. David?
Hi, my name is Ray David. I'm retired from industry, worked for Eastman Kodak and BASF, both of which made phthalate esters back in the day, and phthalate esters were one of the chemicals that I was responsible for. Currently have my own consulting company, and I'm associated with University of Florida.
Thank you. Dr. Fanning?
Hello, my name is Eleanor Fanning, and I'm a senior public health toxicologist at the Washington State Department of Health. I have a PhD in environmental health sciences, training in molecular and cell biology, and I'm a board certified toxicologist. My current work is mostly around toxics in consumer products, as well as development of interagency chemical action plans for the state of Washington, including the work we did on phthalates.
Thank you. Dr. Martinez, I don't see her on the list, so maybe we'll go to Dr. Rowland. Let's see. Dr. Rowland.
Couldn't find my mute button. Hi, I'm Craig Rollins. I'm a principal toxicologist at Underwriters Laboratory Solutions, or UL Solutions. I'm in the Sustainable Chemistry group, and I do risk assessments on all sorts of consumer products. Prior to that, I was at Dow Chemical working industrial chemicals around many different products and businesses. and I also spent some time at the US FDA. I'm trained in molecular toxicology, mechanism of actions, and endocrine disruptors.
Thank you. Dr. Spade?
Hi, I'm Dan Spade. I'm an assistant professor at Brown University in the Department of Pathology and Laboratory Medicine. I am a reproductive and developmental toxicologist, and I study mostly male reproductive toxicants, including phthalates and the effect of phthalates on testis development.
Thank you. Dr. Wolf?
I'm Doug Wolf, veterinarian, and have a residency and PhD in veterinary pathology by training. Most of my expertise has been in toxicologic pathology, as well as carcinogenesis, and developing and implementing new approach methods for chemical evaluation. I've recently retired. Retired from both the US EPA, where I spent 16 years in the Office of Research and Development, and most recently from Syngenta Crop Protection, where I was implementing new approach methods for evaluating new chemicals. Thank you.
Well, thanks to everyone, and I didn't see anyone else join on the screen, so I'm going to turn it back over to our designated federal official, Dr. Kamal.
Thank you, Dr. Cobb. And moving on to our next agenda item, and I have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Nancy Beck, the Principal Deputy Assistant Administrator for the Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention. Dr. Beck.
Thank you, Dr. Kamal. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be joining you today as you prepare for the phthalates peer review meeting, which is, I think, in just 2 weeks. I know the committee has heard this before, and I've said it before, but peer review is so important to our work. It ultimately gives us assurance that our risk evaluations are using the best available science, because that's our goal. We have to be sure everything we do is supported by the science. And this meeting is particularly important because it deals with not just 1, but 5 chemicals representing an important class of chemistries. And our team at EPA has put in countless hours preparing hundreds of documents to support the review of 5 phthalates and organizing a 5-day peer review meeting. I want to thank the entire team at EPA for their hard work and their dedication. I know it's been a heavy lift, and I personally have learned so much from them through all our discussions on these assessments. I also know that reviewing these documents and taking time out of your busy schedule is a tremendous ask for all our committee members. After all, it's 3 full risk evaluations, parts of 2 others, and then there's a cross-cutting document that will impact all 5 chemicals. So thank you for giving us your time and your expertise. We know it's a lot to look through and consider. We also recognize the large volumes of documents, some of which were released for public comment in early January. Unfortunately, we're just subject to some very aggressive deadlines for these risk evaluations because of a consent order from the courts. So we're doing our best to give you all the time we can give you, while also ensuring we meet these legally mandated deadlines. Fortunately, we are thankful that you have assisted us with other TSCA risk evaluation peer reviews, so you have some familiarity with the layout, the structure, and our general approaches. So as you prepare for the upcoming peer review meeting, I'd encourage you to have an open and honest discussion today on all the charge questions. These charge questions were chosen by the team because they will help EPA address particular topics that are important for at least one of the assessments, and some of the questions are important to all of the assessments. And I know 20 charge questions is a lot, but as I said before, this peer review is going to support the risk evaluations for 5 chemicals. So that's why there's so much information. And as I'm sure you all know, phthalates are used in a whole range of applications. So it's imperative that we get the science behind these reviews right to make sure that we're protecting people when we need to, and we're not overburdening companies that support the country's economic growth. We need your feedback on how to integrate cumulative risk into these assessments. And while all these assessments are different chemicals, they do have some key similarities when it comes to hazard and exposure. And that's why we're reviewing them all together. So your input on cumulative review particularly can help guide future risk evaluations if we have another group of chemistries like the phthalates, where it makes sense to review them all together. We're also looking for your feedback on many of the approaches and methods that we use to evaluate these chemicals. The dermal exposure methods are a good example of this, so we can potentially use these approaches in future risk evaluations. So while these charge questions and this peer review is focused only on these 5 phthalates, your input will set our program up for success in the future as we carry forward all the lessons learned. That's why it's really important, and I'm going to again encourage you to have a robust science-focused discussion today and at the peer review meeting in a couple of weeks. I want to encourage you to work hard to achieve consensus. This is why we take the time to have FACA panels. Please make sure you ask clarifying questions, listen to the comments from each other and from all our stakeholders. And I would be remiss if I didn't also take a moment to thank our many stakeholders. We look forward to receiving your constructive input and suggestions as we work to finalize these documents within a very short window. And remember that our entire EPA team is here to help. It's their job to provide clarifying information and to respond to technical questions. With that, I'll turn things back over to Dr. Kamal to start the discussion on the charge questions. Thank you all again for your time and your commitment to sound science. It is greatly appreciated.
Thank you very much, Dr. Beck, for your welcoming and introductory remarks. And at this time, I would like to turn to our agency speaker, Anthony Luz, of the Office of Pollution Prevention and Toxics in EPA, who will present the background information on the draft risk evaluations and the technical support documents.
Thanks,
Tony?
Dr. Kamal.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Dr. Kamal. This is Anthony Luz on the Existing Chemicals Risk Assessment Division at EPA. I'm just going to take the next couple of minutes to walk you through some background information pertaining to the peer review of the 2025 draft risk evaluations for BBP, DCHP, DHP, as well as technical support documents for BBP and DIBP, and then several cross-cutting documents, including the cross-phthalate human health benchmark dose analysis, a cancer analysis, and a cumulative risk assessment. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide provides a timeline of activities pertaining to the 5 high-priority phthalates, as well as 2 manufacturer-requested phthalates, DIDP and DINP. So moving through this timeline from left to right, you can see that the 5 high-priority phthalates were first designated as high-priority substances in December 2019. Similarly, the manufacturer requests for risk evaluations of DIDP and DINP were granted in 2019. As we continue to move through this timeline, in August of 2020, we finalized the scoping documents for the 5 high-priority phthalates. And then in August of 2021, we finalized the scoping documents for DIDP and DINP, so the 2 manufacturer-requested phthalates. In May of 2023, we held a SAC peer review of EPA's draft proposed approach for cumulative risk assessment of phthalates under TSCA. And then in July and August of 2024, so last summer, we held a SAC peer review of the DIDP risk evaluation, as well as several DINP technical support documents. And then the risk evaluations for DIDP and DINP were finalized in January of 2025. Also in January of 2025, we issued the draft risk evaluation for DCHP, as well as various technical support documents for BBP, DBP, DHP, and DIBP. In May of this year, so May 2025, we issued draft risk evaluations for DBP and DHP. And then we anticipate that in just a couple of days, if not weeks, so this month, July of 2025, we'll be issuing the draft risk evaluations for BBP and DIBP. So those aren't quite yet publicly available, but we anticipate they'll be available by the end of the month. And then, of course, we're all here for the current SAC peer review meeting, which will begin on August 4th and run through August 8th for the 5 high-priority phthalates. And then as Dr. Beck indicated, we're under a very tight timeline, so we anticipate finalizing the risk evaluations for all 5 of the high priority phthalates in December of 2025. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide just provides a little additional background information. So phthalates are all primarily used as plasticizers in polyvinyl chloride products, as well as in numerous other types of products, including adhesives, sealants, paints, coatings, rubber, and other applications. So because of similarities in exposure and physical chemical properties, as well as hazard properties, we, EPA, have developed, these draft risk evaluations and the cumulative risk assessment in parallel. And of course, recommendations from previous SAC meetings in 2023 and 2024 on previous phthalates work. Many of those recommendations from the SAC have been incorporated into the current draft risk evaluations for DEHP, DBP, and DCHP, as well as the various technical support documents for all 5 of the high priority phthalates. Next slide, please. Okay, so the upcoming peer review includes 5 phthalates, and many of the documents that support those 5 individual chemical risk evaluations. So the intent of this slide is to help clarify which documents can be found in which dockets. So on the left in green, you see all of the technical support documents, referred to as TSDs, that support individual chemical risk evaluations. So the TSDs include the physical chemistry, fate and transport, environmental hazard and non-cancer, human health hazard, consumer exposure and indoor exposure, environmental releases and occupational exposure, as well as environmental media, general population and environmental exposure, and the systematic review documents for all 5 of the high priority phthalates. For DEHP, DBP, and DCHP, all of these documents can be found in the peer review docket in the TSCA docket for the individual chemical. In addition to the individual technical support documents, there are 3 cross-chemical TSDs, which contain information relevant to all 5 phthalates, and those are shown in yellow in the middle of the slide. So these cross-chemical documents include the cancer assessment, the meta-analysis and benchmark dose assessment of fetal testicular testosterone, and the revised cumulative risk analysis technical support documents. So these 3 documents can also be found in the peer review docket for the SAC review and the TSCA docket for each individual chemical. So DIBP and BBP are slightly different. The consumer, occupational, and general population exposure TSDs and systematic review documents are not in the peer review docket. So see the bolded outline of the 4 TSDs on the left. So EPA anticipates that these documents will be added to the individual chemical or TSCA dockets in the coming days. On the remaining 3 TSDs, physical chemistry and fate and environmental and human health hazard TSDs are available in the peer review docket, as well as their DIBP and BBP individual chemical TSCA dockets. And for your convenience, we've listed all of the docket numbers for peer review and the individual chemicals on the lower right side of this slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so why are all of the phthalate risk evaluations not included in the current review? Well, EPA is seeking feedback on approaches used across the phthalates through this SAC review. So again, this SAC review includes the draft risk evaluations for DBP, DCHP, and DEHP, as well as the BBP and DIBP environmental and non-cancer human health hazard and fate technical support documents. And of course, the exposure methodologies used in the draft risk evaluations for DBP, DCHP, and DEHP will all be applicable to BBP and DIBP, and will account for SAC comments and recommendations, as well as comments from the public in the BBP and DIBP exposure assessments. For environmental and human health hazard assessments, there are some key differences. That's why we're including the environmental and human health hazard TSDs for all 5 of the high priority phthalates in this current review. And finally, SAC review on the approaches detailed in these risk evaluations will be useful in shaping not only these specific phthalate evaluations, but also future chemical risk evaluations as well. Next slide, please. I'll turn it back over to Dr. Kamal.
Thank you, Dr. Luz. So we're going to open discussions now. If anyone has any questions about the EPA background presentation, please raise your hand. Okay, I don't see any hands, but let me check the second page. No hands. So in this case, we can move forward to our next agenda item, and that would be public commenters. So we have 2 public commenters registered to give oral comments. The first is Mr. or Ms. Julianne Ogden.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you, Dr. Kamal, and the SAC committee members for putting together this preparatory meeting today. My name is Julian Ogden. I am a manager at Bergeson and Campbell Consortia Management. I manage several phthalate consortia at BCCM, and I'm representing those consortia today. That includes the DBP Consortium, the DIBP Consortium, the DEHP Consortium, and the BBP Consortium. I won't get into our specific comments today, but I will note for the SAC that we did submit written comments on the 18th, so last Friday. And within those comments, we do have additional suggested draft charge questions for consideration. Those span EPA's approach to benchmark dose modeling, as well as their selection process for points of departure and reference doses. So if the SAC has any questions or if EPA has any questions, we welcome them. We look forward to the peer review meeting, and I thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ogden. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Ogden? The written public comment that she referred to, I think it would be posted today in the docket, and it will be available for the SAC to review it and for EPA.
Hey,
Dr. Cobb? Yes.
Yeah, real quick. This is George Cobb. Is that public comment currently available in the docket, or is it?
I checked in the morning. It was not yet available, but it might have been available in the past hour or so. I'm not sure. I can check again.
Okay, that's kind of important to know but we don't have to know that right this instant, but it's good to know so that if there are comments from the committee about those suggested changes, we can address those. But that we've got a couple of hours to get that figured out.
Sure.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I just want to interject and also state to the committee, this is only for any reason where the charge questions are not clear, or that of the scope of that charge question is not clear, that we will address any of the public comments for this particular meeting.
But Tamu, if the comment suggests a change in the charge question and
That's
the committee thinks that that's not a reasonable thing, I think we need to comment on that.
That's appropriate. Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have any question? If not, then we can move to the second public commenter, Rashmi Juglekar. Are they present?
Hi, hello. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Rashmi Jaglaker. I'm the Associate Director of Science Policy and Engagement at the University of California, San Francisco's program on reproductive health and the environment. And I would really like to firstly thank all of you for serving in this really critical role and for providing the opportunity to speak today. So in many cases, the DHP and DBP draft risk evaluations failed to incorporate the best available science, and they make scientifically unsupported assumptions that could result in serious acceptance of risks to human health. These cases include EPA's failure to adequately examine real-world phthalate exposures and risks, adequately identify and quantify risk to PESS, and continue EPA's dangerous pattern of failing to consider high-end exposure risk scenarios or exposure scenarios in their risk determinations. We've highlighted these cases in detail in our public comments that we will be submitting to all of you on Friday. But today I want to highlight the major flaws in EPA's process of identifying and evaluating scientific evidence to support the human health hazard assessments for DEHP and DBP, since many of the proposed charge questions pertain to the hazard assessments. And we'll be kind of reiterating these points during the public meeting on August 4th. So EPA's approach to hazard identification begins by excluding really the vast majority of published toxicity studies for both DEHP and DBP without scientific justification. And then it quickly moves to a conclusion that there's not sufficient evidence to support hazard identification for most endpoints other than male reproductive harm. First, EPA failed to identify and evaluate relevant health effects studies for both chemicals in a manner that's consistent with the best available science. And really, the foundation of health protective risk assessment is systematic review. The NASEM and the SAC have, in multiple reports, provided EPA with the best available methods for conducting systematic reviews that ensures all health effects studies are considered in a manner consistent with the best available science and that's free from financial conflicts of interest. EPA has yet to adopt these methods. In both assessments, EPA did not rely on a pre-published chemical-specific systematic review protocol and evaluated the evidence-based inconsistently, resulting in an incomplete evidence base for the hazard assessment. So for all evidence streams, EPA relied on a literature search that hasn't been updated since 2019. For epidemiologic evidence, studies published between 2019 and 2023 were only considered if they were submitted to the docket. For toxicological evidence, all but one study published since 2020 were excluded from consideration altogether for the DEHP hazard assessment. And they didn't consider any of the toxicological studies from its literature review for studies published between 2014 and 2019 for dose response assessment. These practices are not consistent, again, with the best available science. Recent guidance recommends that systematic review should be updated no more than 12 months before publication of a review. The outcome component of the PICO statement also has some issues. They actually state that the human and animal outcomes must be at the organ level, which would actually screen out for like male fetal testosterone changes or male reproductive harm, which are the endpoints that EPA ended up evaluating for dose response. And they also followed this further filtering process post-PICO, which actually excluded 733 PICO-relevant health effect studies from consideration for DEHP and 446 PICO-relevant health effect studies from consideration for DBP. This is not a significant, or this is a significant, not an insignificant amount of excluded studies. And really what these methodological flaws result in is an insufficient starting point for evaluating the scientific literature for both chemicals. EPA then immediately disregarded all epidemiologic evidence from consideration for dose response assessment for both chemicals, and they narrowed the body of toxicological studies to 50 studies for DEHP and only 7 studies for DBP. Of these remaining studies, EPA systematically discounted all of them from consideration based on factors like only considering one sex, only considering one rodent species, or casting uncertainty in the clinical relevance of the findings for human health. None of these rationales for excluding studies have scientific merit. So EPA also violated its own guidance and failed to apply benchmark dose modeling to derive non-cancer points of departure. And they failed to rely on the best available methods to quantify non-cancer risks for DEHP and DBP that led to serious underestimations of risk. We applied methods developed by the World Health Organization to quantify the non-cancer risk of male reproductive harm from chronic DEHP and DBP exposure and found that EPA's current MOE approaches consider exposures acceptable that result in a 1 in 80 risk for DHP and a 1 in 36 risk for DVP for male reproductive harm. That's 12,500 times and 28,000 times higher, respectively, than the 1 in 1 million benchmark. So again, we'll be including all of this, yes, in our public comments that we'll be submitting to the SAC on Friday and also on August 4th. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks for considering.
Thank you for your presentation. I was wondering if you have any comments on the scope and clarity of the charge questions.
Nothing beyond what I mentioned today at this time. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Anyone have any questions? Okay, so now we can start now reviewing the charge questions, and we will start by charge question number 1. We will have it for a few seconds on the screen for everyone to read, and then Dr. Luz is going to read the question of the charge question, and then we will open the discussion on it. So let's proceed with the first charge question.
Thanks, Dr. Kamal. Yeah, I'll just jump in. So I'm just going to read the bolded part of the charge question, which is the question directed to the panel and not the preamble to the question. So charge question 1, EPA is requesting feedback on the weight of scientific evidence approach describing the water solubility range for DCHP and the use of a single value as input to exposure models. Are there any questions in this charge question?
No questions as far as I'm seeing. I don't see all the both screens at the same time, but if there is any hand, let me know. If there's no hands, we can move to the next charge question. All right. So this is about the draft environmental hazard TSDs.
Thanks, Dr. Kamal. This is Anthony with EPA. So I'll just pause here for a few seconds and give folks a chance to read the preamble to this charge question, and then I'll read it off. Okay, so for charge question 2, please comment on the strengths and uncertainties of this avian hazard value, including relevance and proposed screening approach for quantitative risk characterization. Are there any questions or comments on this charge question?
I see Dr. Cobb, you have your hands up.
I'll defer to Dr. Otten.
Okay.
Okay, I have a specific question about sources of exposure. With their greater increase in exposure potential for plastics, meaning microplastics, and they're degrading in the environment, there's increasing information that this might be a significant source. And I wondered if this is part of the thinking on the part of the EPA for potential source, because many of these particular data have been drawn from samples taken, 10 years ago or more, before much of this came on scene.
This is Anthony Luz with EPA. Yeah, I think that's fine to include in your response, and we look forward to your comments on that.
Okay, one further small question. I've gathered a fair amount of literature on more sensitive measurement techniques that would resolve some of the question about sensitivity of the assay methods. Is it appropriate to incorporate all that into the response to this question?
Yeah, that would absolutely be appropriate to include for this charge question. This is Anthony with EPA.
Thank you.
Dr. Cobb, do you still have a question?
Yeah, I do. I wonder if the way the question is framed is broad enough to include whether or not the 100 milligram per kilogram LOAEL is the correct value from that specific study that is cited.
Can we have the question on the screen?
So in essence, the question is that LOAEL of 100 from Abdul Ghani actually the correct value out of that paper?
Hi, Dr. Cobb. This is Anthony Lez with EPA. I think, yeah, that's totally fair question to ask. So that would be one of the uncertainties or limitations of that study. If you think we're not selecting the right low AL, that's, I think, totally fair game to comment on.
Right. Fair enough. And that question was more intended to target some of the responses rather than, so you guys kind of have a heads up.
Dr. Ottinger?
And following up on that, sorry about that. Is it fair to also propose other measures for evaluating the low L and no L, the boundaries basically, which have not been proposed in the document?
This is George Cobb. I'd say yes, but if EPA has a response, I'm happy to hear.
Hey, this is Anthony with EPA. Yeah, that's totally fair game to comment on that.
Thanks very much.
Okay, any other questions? If not, we can move to charge question number 3.
Okay, charge question 3. I'll just give folks a couple of seconds to skim the preamble, then I'll read the question. Okay, charge question 3. Please review and comment on the strengths and uncertainties of the methodology and data used to derive a chronic COC for aquatic invertebrates. Are there any comments on this charge question?
Allah?
Yes, Dr. Ottinger?
I'd like to ask the EPA if it is fair to put together some of the information from other aquatic species beyond invertebrates so that some of the commonalities and conserved mechanisms that are observed in fish are also relevant to invertebrates.
Hey, this is Anthony with EPA. You're more than welcome to, although I think maybe that would be more relevant for the chronic COC for aquatic vertebrates.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Now this is charge question 3. We'll leave it on the screen a few seconds.
I apologize. Just to make this is Anthony Lez with EPA. Just to make a clarifying statement, I think for charge question 3, we are asking for information for invertebrates and vertebrates. So for question 3, it's please review and comment on the strengths and uncertainties of the methodology and data used to derive a chronic COC for aquatic invertebrates. And that's and vertebrates. That's a typo. So we should revise charge question 3 to indicate as such.
Thank you. So no questions for charge question 3? All clear. We can move on to charge question 4.
Anthony Laws with EPA. So for charge question 4, please comment on the current application of the TPOD and metabolomic points of departure, or MPODs, in the phthalate draft environmental hazard assessments in a weight of evidence manner, and if there are any suggestions for improving their comparisons to the corresponding environmental hazard thresholds, so acute and chronic, for future application in TSCA chemical risk evaluations. In your response, please include whether the TPOD and or MPOD data presented in DBP, BBP, and DIBP is sufficient to support a chemical-specific COC. Any questions or comments on charge question 4?
I see Dr. Cobb raising his hand.
So this is not a question, but this is very important for the committee. I think it's appropriate to make this point. These transcriptomic points of departure are relatively new in the risk assessment process, at least as I understand it, for EPA. And how to handle those relative to the more organ-specific or organismal-specific toxicities is very important. I think in our last review of a chemical for EPA, one of the charge question groups thought one way and another charge question group thought another way about this. So it's kind of important that we work through this well as a committee and give the EPA our best advice on this. So that is my comment, my encouragement to the committee regarding this charge question. And I see Dr. Wolf has his hand up.
So are you, I guess, to kind of follow on Dr. Cobb's discussion of this, because I think this is an important new area, and I applaud the agency for addressing it. But there are also non-aquatic vertebrate data in this realm, which might be informative. So how expansive were you planning on not just looking at aquatic vertebrate data in this with transcriptomics, metabolomics, but transcriptomics, metabolomics, and the benchmark dose modeling that's occurred with these chemicals and others to look at the how do you implement this? Are you trying to be more expansive from where this question is going? Or are you really trying to focus just on the aquatic vertebrate species? Because there's a lot going on in this area.
Hi, it's Anna Lowett on behalf of EPA. So to answer that question, so this specific question is focused. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Thanks. Focused on some data collected by EPA laboratories specific to several of the phthalates. And we certainly recognize that many organizations are working in the omics space in a more meaningful and broad sense of how to use omics in the risk assessment process. And if any of that applies
not only to this question, but more broadly to phthalates, in that maybe there's additional data that we did not consider that would certainly be within the realm of information the panel may want to discuss.
So thank you. Ella, I think we can move forward.
Sure. So let's move to the next charge question. It's about the draft non-cancer human health hazard technical support documents. Dr. Lutz, can you read the question?
Sure. This is just preamble. So EPA has developed draft non-cancer human health hazard assessments for DCHP, BBP, DBP, DIBP, and DHP, as well as the draft meta-analysis and benchmark dose modeling of fetal testicular testosterone for DHP, DBP, BBP, DIBP, and DCHP, which supports the dose response assessment presented in the non-cancer human health hazard assessment for each phthalate. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is charge question 5A, which is pertaining to the draft non-cancer human health hazard assessment for DEHP. So part 1, please comment on the strengths and uncertainties pertaining to EPA's preliminary conclusions on the nutritional/metabolic effects related to glucose/insulin homeostasis. In part 2, please comment on the strengths and uncertainties pertaining to EPA's preliminary conclusions on the potential hazard DHP poses to the female reproductive tract. Is there any questions or comments on charge question 5A?
Dr. Wolf?
Yeah, I'm wondering how you're defining metabolic syndrome, because syndrome is not a disease. There's several different definitions in the public literature. You do talk about insulin resistance, but that is only really a necessary feature of the World Health Organization definition, not even the Diabetic Association definition. So, and there's other features of in the patient that have to occur before you call a patient having metabolic syndrome. So are you going all the way to metabolic syndrome? In which case, I don't see any data about that. Otherwise, are you just concerned about insulin resistance? And in which case you need to really clarify this or specifically define what you mean by metabolic syndrome.
Live. Yeah. Hi, this is John Alleran with EPA. So this question is intended to more broadly address the suite of studies that, with numerous endpoints, both with glucose homeostasis and insulin, and even more broadly some lipid studies. So we'd seen that referred to as metabolic syndrome, but did not have a specific organization definition in mind. So perhaps we can, do you have any suggestions about how to frame the question so that it captures that more accurately?
Yeah, I just remove the references to metabolic syndrome and just be specific about what you want. Because if you're opening the can of worms, which is metabolic syndrome, that's got a specific series of features. It's not a disease. There's really not a specific etiology. It includes cardiovascular, diabetes, obesity, things, and there's 5 or 6 features that you have to have at least 3 of them to be called metabolic syndrome. So I would argue that while there's in the literature, they do talk about it around phthalates in what you're asking is different. And so rather than get all caught up in metabolic syndrome, I would just ignore, not discuss that particular syndrome as a human patient syndrome, and just focus specifically, if you're talking about glucose, insulin, homeostasis, and phthalates interaction with that, just focus on that. Or the liver metabolism changes, focus on that. And eliminate.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Thanks for that conversation. I think that's very helpful.
All right. So are there any questions for charge questions 5A2? All right, looks like we're all good. So we can move to the next charge question, 5B.
Hi, this is Anthony Luz with EPA. So I'll read charge question 5B. Please comment on the strengths and uncertainties in the selected HED, including EPA selection of co-critical studies and the weight of scientific evidence from the study supporting a refined consensus LOAL. And again, charge question 5B is pertaining to the draft non-cancer human health hazard assessment for DEHP. Are there any questions or comments on charge question 5B?
Looks it's clear. So let's go to the next charge question. 5C.
Okay, so charge question 5C, again, is pertaining to the draft non-cancer human health hazard assessment for DEHP. It has two parts. So part one, please comment on the strengths and uncertainties of the supporting data. Part two, please comment on EPA's decision to perform route-to-route extrapolation from the oral POD to derive an inhalation POD. Are there any questions or comments on charge question 5C?
All right, looks clear. We can move to the next charge question. 5D.
Okay, charge question 5D. So this charge question deals with the draft non-cancer human health hazard assessment for DCHP. So please comment on the strengths and uncertainties in the selected acute/intermediate/chronic HED for DCHP. Are there any questions or comments on charge question 5D?
All right, looks like we're good here too. So let's move to the next 5E.
Okay, charge question 5E pertains to the draft non-cancer human health hazard assessment for BBP. The question, please comment on the strengths and uncertainties in the selected acute/intermediate/chronic HED for BBP. Are there any questions or comments on charge question 5E?
Looks like 5E looks clear also. So let's keep going. 5F.
Okay, charge question 5F pertains to the draft meta-analysis and benchmark dose modeling of fetal testicular testosterone for the 5 high-priority phthalates. So the charge question, please comment on the strengths and uncertainties associated with the methods and data used in the updated analysis. In your response, Please comment on EPA's preliminary decision to use model results obtained using Metaphor version 4.6.0 versus version 2.0.0. Are there any questions or comments on charge question 5F?
Looks like 5F is also okay. So let's move to the next charge question. 5G.
Okay, charge question 5G. This deals with the draft non-cancer human health hazard assessment for DBP. So please comment on the strengths and uncertainties in the selected acute/intermediate/chronic HED for DBP. Are there any questions or comments on charge question 5G?
No questions on 5G. All right, let's go to the 5H.
Okay, for charge question 5H, which addresses the draft non-cancer human health hazard assessment for DIBP. So please comment on the strengths and uncertainties in the selected acute/intermediate/chronic HED for DIBP. Are there any questions or comments on charge question 5H?
All right, 5H is clear. The next one. Now we have it's about the draft cancer human health hazard assessment. And the charge question is charge question 6.
Okay, so for charge question 6, again, this question has 2 parts. Part A, please comment on the strengths and uncertainties of EPA's preliminary conclusion that the tumor triad in rats is related to PPAR alpha activation following chronic exposure to DEHP. In your response, please include discussion of the strengths and uncertainties of available data supporting key events in the PPAR alpha mode of action, or MOA, and the scientific rationale for a threshold approach for cancer dose response assessment. In Part B, please comment on the strengths and uncertainties of EPA's preliminary cancer classification for DEHP. Are there any questions or comments on charge question 6?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Yes, Dr. David.
As I happen to be a discussant on both parts A and B, and this applies to the next question as well. And I find myself cutting and pasting to respond to this. It strikes me that couldn't A and B be combined? I mean, you're basically asking the same question twice, aren't you?
So this is George Cobb. I'll interject. I can see a reason to have both of these delineated out. I see where EPA is going. They want to know if they're on the right track with the key events for the mode of action, and then they want to know, is their preliminary cancer classification correct? Which is, I think, maybe a higher level question than A, but I should let EPA respond.
Hi, this is Anthony Laws with EPA. Thanks for that question, Dr. David, and your response, Dr. Cobb. Yeah, I agree with you, Dr. Cobb. I think for Part A, we're looking for specifically your opinions and your thoughts on the data supporting the PPAR alpha mode of action and its relation to the tumor triad Then part B, we're looking more generally for you to comment on our specific cancer classification. Just because those are broken into two parts, I guess, you know, if the same response applies to both, I think that's also totally fine. You can just have it as one response to both parts if you find it easier to write it in that fashion.
Great.
Dr. Gentry?
Yes, I was just going to add to that. I think it seems to me a division between the quantitative approach versus the qualitative classification. So there may be some overlap, but I think with part A, we are trying to, there's a justification there for what quantitative approach they took versus B, where there's just a classification. So you may have different criteria around each of those questions.
See Dr. Ottinger's hand.
Dr. Ottinger, yeah.
Yeah, just a comment. The PPAR activation mechanism of action is going to light up also in non-cancer effects. So just putting a thought, saver in there that we might have some cross-cutting or conserved mechanisms that change according to threshold effects.
All right. Well, thank you all for these comments. Are there any other questions regarding charge question 6? Any more feedback from EPA?
Nothing else from EPA. Thanks, Dr. Kamal.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's move on to the next charge question. Charge question 7.
Okay, so for charge question 7, this deals with BBP and DBP. Again, this charge question has two parts. So part A, please comment on the strengths and uncertainties of EPA's preliminary cancer classification and rationale for not carrying forward pancreatic acinar cell tumors in rats into dose response assessment for BBP. Part B, please comment on the strengths and uncertainties of EPA's preliminary cancer classification and rationale for not carrying forward pancreatic acinar cell tumors in rats into dose response assessment for DBP. Are there any questions or comments on this charge question?
Dr. Wolf?
Yeah, I think we just have to be mindful as we answer charge questions 6 and 7, both parts A's and B's, that the two groups answering these questions need to make sure that they're communicating with each other, because there'll be a lot of repetition across all of it, which is fine. But as we write up the document, we'll want to make sure that it's consistent, because there's going to be a lot of mode of action discussion, relevance of the outcomes, and then the impact on your interpretation for the risk characterization and final cancer classification.
Thank you. Any other questions? Looks like charge question 7 is okay. So let's keep going. Charge question 8.
Okay, charge question 8. Again, this has two parts. So part A, please comment on the strengths and uncertainties of EPA's application of the recap framework. Part B, please comment on EPA's preliminary conclusion that the lack of chronic toxicity and carcinogenicity studies are not a significant source of remaining scientific uncertainty in the qualitative and quantitative risk characterization for DIBP and BCHP. Is there any questions or comments on charge question 8?
No questions on charge question 8? Then we can move to the next charge question. So now it's going to be about the draft revised cumulative risk assessment technical support documents.
Thanks, Dr. Kamal. So charge question 9, please comment on the strengths and uncertainties of the selection of DBP as the index chemical. Are there any questions or comments on charge question 9?
So
Dr. Cobb, yeah.
Yeah, this is George Cobb. Tony, and I haven't gotten to this charge question. I mean, to looking at the documents in depth for this, I've just not gotten through some other text that I'm reading for this. Do the documents that you've provided have the additional data for other chemicals that could be considered but are not being considered because you're using DBP as the index chemical?
This is Anthony Luz with EPA. So do you mean, just to ask a follow-up clarifying question to that, Dr. Cobb, do you mean specifically within the 5 high priority phthalates and the manufacturer requested phthalates, or beyond those phthalates?
Well, yeah, you're saying that you're using the DBP as the index chemical for these 5. That's correct?
That is correct. We selected DBP as the index chemical for our cumulative analysis of the phthalates, which includes the 5 high priority phthalates as well as DINP, so the one manufacturer requested.
Okay, good. So now the question is, do the documents that you provided to us have data that would allow a comparison of DBP as an index chemical to the other chemicals that could have been chosen out of this group of 6, or is the information simply there for DBP?
So in our revised draft technical support document for the cumulative analysis of the phthalates under TSCA, we kind of walk through our rationale. So, of those phthalates, we really only considered 2 of the phthalates as candidates for the index chemical, and that's kind of all detailed in section 2.3 of our TSD. We do kind of walk through the body of studies for these phthalates as it pertains to, effects within the phthalate syndrome, and talk about the, quantity and quality of available data for each phthalate. Then, of course, ultimately, the main deciding factor between DHP and DBP was DBP just had more fetal testicular testosterone data in the low end range of the dose response assessment. So we kind of walk through, that data and our rationale for choosing DBP. Again, in section 3.
Yeah. And I wasn't trying to get into the conversation that we're going to have in a couple of weeks, but I did want to see if that information was there to prevent something later. Okay, so I really appreciate that response and the way that the documents are evidently prepared. So, and I see Dr. Babbage has a question.
Yes.
Yes, I just was wondering, I saw, it was a nice presentation, very clear, but I always like to see the underlying data, and I'm not sure where the best place is to start looking for that, other than looking at the individual citations. Has EPA summarized that anywhere else?
Yeah, this is Anthony with EPA. So again, in our benchmark dose technical support document, that's where we present all of the data from the individual studies that was actually modeled in our meta-analysis and benchmark dose modeling analysis. And that's where you'll see all the benchmark dose results. So that would probably be a good place to start. Also, I'd like to note in one of the appendix tables in the draft revised technical support document for the cumulative risk analysis, we actually extracted, all of the data from all of the studies included in the meta-analysis, and we show the percent change at each dose level across each study. So that would be another good place to go. I don't remember the exact appendix table number, but it's cited in section 2.3.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Babbage. Are there any other questions for charge question 9? Okay, we can move to the next question.
Okay.
Your hand is still, your hand is still raised, Dr. Babbage. Go ahead, Tonya.
Okay, charge question 10. Please comment on the strengths and uncertainties of the derived RPFs. Are there any questions or comments on charge question 10?
Looks clear. Let's move on. Charge question 11.
Okay, so charge questions 11 and 12 pertain to how we integrated our cumulative risk assessment results within the individual chemical risk evaluations. So starting with charge question 11, again, it has 2 subparts. So part A, please comment on the strengths and uncertainties of option 1. And in part 2, please comment on the strengths and uncertainties of option 2. Are there any questions or comments on charge question 11?
No questions? Then we can move to the next charge question. I hope I'm giving enough time. So, I mean, if anyone needs to go back to any other questions, we can do that too.
Exactly. You said exactly what I was going to say, Ala. This
Yeah.
is George Copsby.
Right. Okay, charge question 12.
Okay, charge question 12. So the draft risk evaluations of DBP, DCHP, and DHP contain 3 examples of the application of phthalates cumulative risk assessment, CRA, within an individual chemical risk evaluation. Please comment on the integration of the CRA approaches within the single chemical evaluations. Are there any questions or comments on charge question 12?
I see Dr. Fanning raising her hand.
Yeah, thank you. So discussants, we had a very brief conversation about the scope of the charge question, and there is some appreciation for kind of the breadth of the question. We do not propose narrowing it. However, there are a lot of aspects of integration of the cumulative risk approaches into each of those single chemical documents. And it might be helpful to just hear from EPA at this time to help understand what your intent was in this question, and whether there's some areas of particular concern to EPA that you would like input on.
Yeah, this is Anthony Luz with EPA. I can take a shot at answering your question, then I'll invite any of our senior science advisors on the line to add in. But I would just like to note, this cumulative risk assessment of phthalates is the first time in OPPT that we're, really conducting a cumulative assessment. So, we're learning as we go. So we're trying to figure out the best way to integrate this into our risk evaluation process, not only for phthalates, but, in the future, if there's other groups of chemicals that this might be, scientifically supportable for. So really, I think it's broad by design because, we're still, figuring out the best way to do this ourselves. But again, I would invite, any of our senior science advisors on the line to add on to that if they have anything.
Hi, it's Anna Lowick. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. So just to sort of add to what you heard from Tony, the toxics office, this is the first time we've done this, and we've given you a couple of examples of how the team would consider both the single chemical exposure and risk calculations and the CRA as it's defined in the two options, which is a little bit different than the way other organizations may define cumulative risk. And my guess is that we'll hear from some of you about that at the meeting. But so, you know, as we think about the integration of cumulative with the single chemical, there are a variety of layers to that. There's the presentation of the material in its order and structure, just the documents themselves. It would be how the information is mathematically derived through addition approaches, but also as we think about the option 1 and option 2, the practicality of those, that taking these approaches and put them in a real world decision-making context is one of the things that we're certainly struggling with. We recognize parts of the answer to that is heavily in the policy space and will be outside of the purview of the SAC. But in terms of the presentation of the material, how it's described, the characterization of it, those are the kinds of things we're looking for.
Okay, I think that's helpful. I also maybe just a quick follow-up for Anna. Just to distinguish between charge question 11, which really had to do with option 1 and option 2, versus kind of what you're looking for in charge question 12. Do you have any refining points on that?
Yeah, I'm sorry to have confused those. So there is some overlap, and there will be some, and like some of the other questions, some of the technical response across the two will be the same. However, we're hoping in charge question 11 is more about the mathematics and looking at how the math is done and the underlying assumptions that go into that math. And in this one, it's more about thinking about the cumulative and the single chemical in combination and in the interpretation thereof, if you see the distinction.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any other questions for charge question 12?
Yeah, a quick one.
Dr. Wolf?
Yeah, this Doug Wolf. So to continue on your comments, Dr. Lowett, so you're not looking at other issues such as modifying factors. You want to stay specifically on just the chemical piece of the cumulative risk, or are you interested in like a broader conversation on cumulative risk?
Can you clarify what you mean as modifying factors?
Well, intercurrent disease, differential ages, interactions between chemicals, that type of thing.
Well, okay, thanks for that. So the extent to which there are data that exist today that would we can use quantitatively to inform those, that would be helpful. But
Okay.
We're not in a position to be using that information in a environmental justice or vulnerability or that kind of context at that point, if that's what you're asking.
No, I was just thinking of some of the papers that have been published looking at issues that might impact exposure routes or outcomes that aren't necessarily just the dose response of the individual chemicals.
The extent to which it would affect dose response and we could consider those, that would be helpful, understanding that none of these have fully developed PBPK models.
Okay.
The the PK portion of the NHANES assessment is a fairly simple compartment model.
Mhm. All right, thanks.
Thank you. Any more questions? If none, we can move to the next charge question. And it's about dermal exposure. Charge question 13.
Okay. Charge question 13. Please comment on the use of a flux-based approach for estimating dermal exposure to materials with low volatility and low rates of absorption. Are there any questions or comments on charge question 13?
No questions? Then we can move to the next charge question. Charge question 14.
Okay. Before I read this charge question, I just want to make note of some of the text you see here in red font. So after we issued the draft charge questions, we subsequently released a memo for DBP dermal absorption data. So you're seeing reference to that memo here on the slide now. And when we issue the final charge questions, this text in red will be integrated. So for charge question 14, please comment on EPA's evidence integration and examination of the weight of scientific evidence, including strengths, limitations, and uncertainties, and resulting study selection for determination of dermal flux from contact with different forms and formulations of the phthalate, e.g. solid, liquid, neat, aqueous dilution, etc. Are there any questions or comments on charge question 14?
Okay, looks like it's clear. So we can move on to the next charge question.
Okay. Charge question 15. This charge question has 3 parts. So part A, comment on the use of aqueous absorption modeling to estimate dermal uptake from solid materials. Part B, comment on the use of consumer exposure model to approximate the aqueous permeability coefficient, or KP, and the use of the Superfund guidance for dermal risk assessment to estimate the dermal absorbed dose. And part C, suggest alternative approaches for estimating dermal absorption in the absence of data. Are there any questions or comments on charge question 15?
All right, no questions on charge question 15. Then we can move to the next question, charge question 16.
Okay, charge question 16. Please comment on the possibility and likelihood that a non-volatile chemical with low absorption may be contacted multiple times during a work shift, i.e. the worker is handling the chemical intermittently throughout the work shift, and may exist on the skin surface for a total of 8 hours or until the material on the skin surface is depleted, including the representativeness of this exposure scenario to the COUs. Are there any questions or comments on charge question 16?
Dr. Cobb?
So it's not a question, it's a statement. Phthalates are semi-volatile. They are not non-volatile. So the charge question is incorrectly stated. And so you could have low volatility, but you can't call them non-volatile. And I don't know how to fix that other than to change non-volatile to have low volatility.
Thanks, Dr. Cobb. This is Anthony Lowe's with EPA. Yeah, I think we can make that edit. We can change it to semi-volatile. Thanks for catching that.
Right, thank you. Any other questions for charge question 16? No more questions? Then we can move to the next charge question. Charge question 17.
Okay, charge question 17. Please comment on the input data used in the calculations, the strengths and limitations of the dermal absorption refined approach for airbeds. Specifically comment on the equations used to calculate the dermal flux from airbeds to skin for DEHP. Are there any questions or comments on charge question 17?
Looks like 17 is good. We can move to the next charge question. And it's about draft consumer and indoor exposure technical support documents. Charge question 18.
Okay, charge question 18. Please suggest approaches for evaluation of exposure due to direct contact with mucous membranes. Are there any questions or comments on this charge question?
Dr. Babbage, do you have a question? Okay.
Yes. One of the discussants on this team raised an issue asking about the scope of this question. Are you talking about just methods for evaluating, say, penetration of chemicals through mucous membranes, or is it a broader question that has more to do with that would include product use information? And I hope I got that right. I don't know.
Thanks, Doc.
Someone else may want to jump in.
I can just comment a little further. We had a short sort of preliminary exchange about this charge question, and I think there were really 3 questions related to the scope, and just being as brief as possible. The question comments on mouthing of articles, but so there was a question about whether the EPA is requesting information to improve mouthing assessments or only assessments of exposure related to vaginal and anal mucosa. The question that Dr. Babich asked about, use pattern information. So is EPA requesting information about use of articles related to this question? And then finally, is EPA requesting a recommendation for an overall exposure model or requesting information to aid in calculating uptake? Because there are, dermal exposures that are included in the assessment. So is the overall model in question or just the uptake information? Sorry for the long question.
Hi, this is Kathy Denisio on behalf of EPA. I'll try and address some of those. So I think, you're getting at with your question. I was trying to write down your notes on what you asked about. I see what you're asking now regarding the fact that we address mouthing in the sort of preamble to the question, but the question itself is focused on, contact with, as you're saying, the vaginal and anal mucous membranes. So that's something I need to circle back with the team on. I think that certainly we're looking for input on approaches for evaluation of exposure for those vaginal and anal mucous membranes. We don't have a model for that implemented in the assessment. So that's certainly part of the question. I think I'm trying to remember about the various iterations of the questions we've had, because we had other iterations where we were asking about mouthing as well. We'll circle back and see if we want to, revise this to intentionally ask about the mouthing. But I will say that, as the SAC members, it is within your purview to provide information on whatever you may wish to do. So you are able to provide additional information if you wish to. And so that's what I'll say regarding the use pattern information. If you have comments on the various use patterns that were used, duration, frequency of exposure, things like that, I'm assuming is what you're referencing, you certainly can provide that, or additional sources of data for that information, that if there are some known, that's always welcome as part of your response. Did I miss a part of what you asked about?
I don't believe so. Thank you.
Okay, so I think I'll circle back to the team. I can't give an answer right now, but about whether we will change the specific question to ask about mouthing as well. But like I said, you can always add additional information if you choose to do so. You're not limited.
Thank you.
Unless Dr. Cobb corrects me.
Dr. Cobb?
I was just going to say, I appreciate the dialogue, and I think it's an important clarification to make for the committee. I'm not sure a rewrite is going to be helpful. I know that you guys are under lots of timelines to get things done. So for this particular one, I'm not sure that it's going to be particularly helpful, but if that's something you choose to do, I understand. This clearly states what exposures you are considering and which one you're not, and then are you correct in not assuming, or are there better approaches? So I think this is good.
Well, so put it this way, right? To your point, we know that the mucous membrane question is one that we definitely want to ask. And maybe to your point about not rewriting the question, it gets at what I said before, which is that the discussants are welcome to provide comment on any topic that they choose to. They're not limited from doing so. We do ask them to focus on the charge questions, but if you have feedback on the ingestion, maybe, we'll just leave it at that. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for the discussion. Are there any other questions for charge question 18? Okay, we can move to the next charge question. And it's about the draft environmental release and occupational exposure technical support documents.
Okay, so this is charge question 19. Just like to note that this question has two parts. It's kind of a long charge question, so part A is on this slide and part B is on the next slide. So charge question 19A. In section 3.2.2 of the draft environmental release and occupational exposure assessment for DBP, EPA states that there is moderate confidence in the releases modeled for the manufacturing OES. Please comment on the strengths and uncertainties of using standard EPA models and equations for estimating releases in the absence of programmatic data and the confidence in these model estimates. Are there any questions or comments on part A of charge question 19?
Dr. Wright?
Yeah, let me preface this by saying I'm not looking for extra work, but in the essentially introduction to this discussion, you talked about why some of the charge questions apply to only some of the phthalates under review. I'm curious about why this one applies only to DBP and not to more of them or all of them.
This is Anthony Lez. So this charge question is broadly applicable to all the phthalates. Here we're just using DBP as an example.
Okay.
Great. Do we have any other questions for
Thank you.
charge question 19A? You're welcome. If we don't, then we can go to 19B, the second part of it.
Okay, and before I read 19B, I'd just like to note that I misspoke. Charge question 19 actually has 3 parts.
Three parts, okay.
19C will be on the next slide. So 19B, please comment on the potential sources of existing information and approaches that may reduce the uncertainty of EPA's assessment of releases to multimedia categories when using standard models, when programmatic reporting data, PRI, NEI, DMR are unavailable. Are there any questions or comments on 19B?
Okay, 19B looks good. So we can go to the third part of 19C.
Thanks, Dr. Kamal. So charge question 19C, please comment on potential information sources and approaches to support use of a single flow value to refine the surface water concentration estimates. Are there any questions or comments on 19C?
Looks like 19C also looks good. And then we go to the last question, I think. Question 20.
Yep, this is the last charge question, charge question 20. So please suggest additional methods for estimating occupational inhalation exposures to solid particulates, which are more chemical specific. Are there any questions or comments on charge question 20?
Yeah, this is Doug Wolf.
Yes.
Quick clarification. When you use the word particulates, are you being expansive as far as aerosols as well, or are you specifically looking at particulates?
Hi, Dr. Wolf. This is Anthony Les. We're talking here specifically about particulates, not aerosols.
Sounds good. No more questions for charge question 20. Okay, I'd like to circle back if anyone has a question on any of the charge questions that we went over right now. Please do. If none, then I'd like to, yes, Dr.
I was just going to say, we never got an answer to the comments that were posted in the docket by a public commenter. I'm still not, I haven't seen that. And without seeing that, it's difficult to know whether to have any perspective about what that comment was. Because all the commenter said was, we made comments and they're in the docket, and they're not in the docket.
Yes. I checked in the morning, and the docket staff, they go through their QA check and QC all the comments that come in, and it was in the final step of this QC check. And I guess that it can already be now posted in the docket, but I'm not sure. I didn't see it.
Not there. I checked. I checked during this meeting. It's not there, unless somebody can tell me different.
No, so like I said, then you're confirming what I said, is that until the morning I didn't see it. So until now it's not there yet.
So one quick note to all that usually the commenters would make the submission on the day of the meeting, so it should be coming up shortly. We can check in FDMS platform to see if some parts of it is available, Dr. Cobb, and we can confirm with you by going into FDMS, which is not it is a platform before you post to
Right.
regulations.gov.
Yeah.
Well, the concern is that the comment goes through that pathway and this committee doesn't have a chance to say that, yeah, we don't have any comment, or we agree with that comment, or that we disagree with that comment.
We'll check that platform. Otherwise, the docket staff, we can check with the docket staff to see if they can expedite or, any of the submissions that they may have done today or Friday.
So if that's the case, I'm going to say I will not support any inclusion of any comment in the revised charge questions that limits or somewhat calls into question the way that EPA is doing things to protect the environment. If the comments are we need to be less conservative or take approaches that are less rigorous, I want to be on the record that those kinds of comments can't be included to address changes to charge questions that we will not see until it is too late to make comments on.
Mute you. Dr. Cobb, it's Anna Lowett. EPA has those comments. They were sent to us this morning via email. Would it help if someone in our team shared them on the screen and showed you the comments?
If I don't, I have to defer to the DFOs to see if that's acceptable.
Well, the docket process that all the comments, they go through a QA process, a check, and after they check them for content, whether it has any personal identifiable information or any CBI documents, after that they post it for the public. So and in case there are any CBI or PIIs in it, they redact it. So in this case, we are not sure. I mean, I think I would recommend we wait until until it is cleared by our docket staff.
Yeah, that's okay. My comment stands. If the trade association that was speaking is calling for EPA to change the charge questions to make us consider whether the assessment should be revised in a way that is less protective of human health or the environment, it should not be included. And I really hope I don't have to circle back to that in the next public session.
I think what you're saying it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but it depends on, I mean, it makes sense. I agree to that personally. If anybody else also, Temu, you think that would be fine?
I have a question. Did the young lady state or gentleman state when they made that submission?
Hi, are they here?
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Can I jump in here?
Yes, you're here. Okay.
I reached out as I normally do to the commenters, and the person, I'm totally blanking on the person's name right this second, but she did confirm submitting it to me on Thursday. I'm happy to reach out to her again if that's okay with you.
I think I see her here. I see her.
Good.
Yeah,
Good.
sorry. I wasn't
Okay.
sure if you all wanted me to speak up and I couldn't enter the chat, but I am still here. I at least what I could, I mean, it is up to EPA and those who are controlling the meeting. But I'm pleased to at least recite some of the comments if that is useful. I know
This would be very helpful if you can orally
Yes,
state,
thank you.
verbally state them. Yes, please.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, and I will focus on our comments on the charge questions
Yes.
specifically. Okay, great. So just bear with me. It may be a little wordy, but I'm pleased to do this for you all. The consortia are concerned with EPA's approach and use of BMD modeling of fetal testicular testosterone for BBP, DCHP, DEHP, DBP, and DIBP. As described in the consortia's joint comments on the draft risk evaluation of DCHP and the draft cumulative risk assessment submitted on May 9th, 2025, which is included in an appendix to the comments, EPA did not follow its own benchmark dose technical guidance. In an EPA TSD for the CRA, EPA used a benchmark response of 5% relative deviation for fetal testosterone, a continuous endpoint. The BMD guidance, however, recommends that a BMR for a continuous endpoint is a change in the mean equal to one control standard deviation from the control mean. EPA also used a BMR of 10% deviation relative to control mean that was not sufficiently justified or explained for its use. According to EPA guidance, the preferred approach is to define a BMR based on the level of change in the endpoint at which the effect is considered to become biologically significant, as determined by an expert judgment or relevant guidance documents, i.e., National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine in 2017. In this case, 40% testosterone levels based on derivative effects, which is not defensible based on a study by Houdshell et al. In 2015. Lastly, EPA did not utilize modeling averaging approaches, but rather selected a best fitting model based on the lowest, I apologize, but AKAIKE information criteria, and I've never spoken that out loud, or AIC. This is not consistent with BMD modeling practices, as there is no guaranteed best fitting model fits the true dose response relationship, and it has been shown that selecting a single model for a group of fitted models leads to model uncertainty. To address these concerns, we propose the following charge questions. Please comment on the lack of alignment in EPA's approach to BMD modeling with EPA's BMD guidance. Please comment on EPA's use of a BMR5 for quantal endpoints in developmental toxicology studies that are adequately powered to detect such levels of change. Please comment on EPA's use of a BMR10 for efforts on the developing male reproductive system. Please comment on whether the methods and information EPA has used are consistent with the best available science. And please comment on EPA's selection of BMR5, BMR10, BMR40, and or BMR1SD for fetal testicular testosterone. So those are our comments related to benchmark dose guidance. I want to pause here. We have additional comments and additional charge questions, but I want to make sure that I'm respectful of all of your time. So if I can go forward, let me know.
So I've gotten the information I need, but Dr. Gentry has her hand.
I just wanted to comment that I think the committee needs to see these comments, but what she's asking us to look at is covered in charge question 5F, where they ask for the strengths and uncertainties associated with the current benchmark dose modeling method. So I think we need to see the comments, but I don't know that it changes the charge at this point.
I agree 100%. And my comment here is I think EPA I think we've got as many charge questions as we could possibly answer in 5 days. And to add charge questions would be onerous on the committee at this juncture. So those are my comments. And the comments are the kinds that I was concerned about anyway. So I really don't see, I don't necessarily support changing comments changing the charge questions based on these comments, but that's for others to have a say. But we really do need to see them before we can comment specifically on them.
Sure.
But we only have a week before the meeting.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Dr. Oxinger, you have a question?
A comment. I completely agree with Dr. Gentry and Dr. Cobb. And I think if I have to see the questions also, but what I'm getting out of listening, and I apologize if I haven't completely accurately, interpreted what you're saying, you're talking about variability and how much sensitivity there might be to making conclusions from some of the data. So in as much as it's going to be part of 5F charge question, I think we can cover it. And given that you've submitted it in a written form, we can always look at your written comments to double check and see if we're covering those questions that you're asking.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But Mr. Wright?
Mr. Wright, yeah.
Yes, the second commenter today made a lot of criticisms of the risk evaluation. If those aren't captured in the charge questions, are we still able to address them? Seems to me we are from past practice, but I just want to get a confirmation of that.
You're certainly, this is George Cobb, you're certainly welcome to comment on anything science related to this set of documents. Now, sometimes they spill over into how EPA should do things otherwise, but it needs to be addressed to the risk determination process.
Yeah, understood.
I want to take an opportunity to thank Ms. Ogden, Dr. Ogden, I'm not sure, for clarifying that for us. And you disappeared off of my screen after you spoke, so I didn't think we had the opportunity to ask you a question. So I apologize. I didn't know you were still there. And thank you for providing that clarification.
Of course, thank you so much for letting me expand on those comments.
Okay. Well, if we don't have any other questions, then you have a question?
I do. I think
Comment?
excuse the interruption. If we can have the agency, if they would like to weigh in on this commenter, or
I was just gonna ask, yeah. Okay.
All right, thank you.
So if the agency or anyone else have any respond or comment?
This is Anthony Les with EPA. I really appreciate Mrs. Ogden coming back on to, or Dr. Ogden coming back on to, read her more specific questions into the record so that the committee can consider them. At this time, I agree with, the comments of the committee that I think our charge questions are reasonably broad enough to allow the committee to comment on any aspects of the questions or comments raised by the commenter. I welcome any of our senior science advisors to weigh in further, though, if they have anything else they'd like to say.
Do we have any other comments from EPA? Looks okay.
We might be done.
Okay. Well, yeah, you're right. So in this case, I would like to thank everyone. First, I'd like to thank the public commenters for their comments. I'd like to thank EPA for its presentation and for the charge questions. I'd like to thank the committee. I'd like to thank Dr. Beck for her opening remarks. And thank you, everyone. And we will see you in 2 weeks with the peer review meeting on August 4th. Thank you very much, and this meeting is adjourned.